Who let this beggar in? Richard Whitmore shouted, then slammed his pen down on the conference table. Get security up here. The sharp impact echoed across the room. The silver pen cap rolled once across the polished tabletop, then stopped near the edge. Annie Carter flinched. For one moment, she clutched the red-stamped file tightly against her chest, as if it were the only thing keeping her on her feet. Her cleaning uniform was still dusted with grime from the service hallway below. Her natural hair, slightly tousled from the wind outside and the heat of the cramped elevator, framed a face burning with embarrassment. "I'm not a beggar," Annie said. Her voice was small, but clear. "Mr. Ellis, the security guard downstairs, has a bad leg. He said you needed this file urgently, so I only brought it up to help him." A few people around the long table exchanged glances. Richard Whitmore leaned back in his chair and studied the young woman standing in the middle of the conference room as if she were a stain that had just appeared on an expensive carpet. In front of him lay a $900 million contract, waiting only for the final signature. Richard let out a contemptuous laugh. "So now the cleaning staff also provides courier service," he said. "Wonderful. I suppose that's what we pay Harrington and Vale for." Annie swallowed hard. "Sir, I only wanted to help Mr. Ellis." "Then help him by staying on the floor you are paid to clean." Richard tapped 2 fingers against the table, then pointed to the empty space beside his leather briefcase. "Put it there. Then get out of my conference room." Annie stepped closer to the table. She placed the file exactly where Richard had pointed. On the cover was a bold red stamp, "Final signing, copy urgent." She was about to let go, turn around, and leave the room as quickly as she could. But at that moment, her eyes accidentally fell on the contract lying open in front of Richard. Page 8. A financial chart took up most of the page. The columns were perfectly straight. The percentages were neatly aligned. Beneath the chart was a blank space that appeared to contain nothing. But something was wrong. The spacing was off. The final line was slightly heavier. On the paper, there was a faint gray mark, very light, in a place where no printed text should have been. Annie stood still. Richard noticed immediately. His lips tightened. "Why are you still standing there?" Annie blinked, but her eyes remained fixed on the page. That page, Martin Graves, Caldwell's attorney, sat across the table and gave her a thin smile. "This is a private acquisition agreement, young lady. It is not a lunch menu." The remark made several members of Caldwell's team laugh. Victor Caldwell, seated opposite Richard, slowly lifted his coffee cup. His face held a calm look touched with amusement. "Let her speak, Martin. I'm curious to know what this young woman found between the trash bins and the elevator." Richard laughed along with him, a short, smug sound. "Perhaps she can advise us on both mop handles and corporate merger law at the same time." Laughter moved around the table again. Eleanor Price, Richard's legal advisor, was the only one who did not laugh. She only watched Annie, her brows slightly drawn together. It was unclear whether the look meant irritation or a sudden flash of concern. Annie's cheeks burned. "I should go," she whispered. "Yes," Richard said. "You should have gone a long time ago." But Annie's feet did not move. She looked back at page 8. The bottom margin, the right corner, the blank space beneath the chart. A faint line almost disappeared into the paper. It might have been nothing. It might have been only a printing error. Or it might have been a blade wrapped in white paper. Richard's patience ran out completely. He frowned, his voice turning sharp. "Are you still standing there? I told you to leave." Annie did not answer right away. Richard looked around the table, as if his own irritation had become entertainment. "Perhaps this little beggar needs a written invitation to leave. Eleanor? Should we draft one for her? 3 copies? Initialed on every page?" A few people laughed again, mostly because Richard had laughed first. Martin Graves leaned back in his chair. "Make sure it is written in simple language. We don't want to overwhelm her." Richard smiled with satisfaction. "Good idea. Short sentences, large print." Annie lifted her head. This time, she did not look at Martin. She looked straight at Richard. "You should look at it yourself," she said. "Page 8, bottom right corner, directly under the chart." Richard's smile vanished. "What did you just say?" "Page 8, Annie repeated. "Bottom right corner, under the chart." Eleanor Price shifted slightly in her chair. Her patience was clearly wearing thin, but the certainty in her eyes was no longer as firm as it had been. "Miss Carter, step away from the table." Martin Graves let out a dry laugh. "Young lady, this is a contract worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Our legal team reviewed it 3 times. Annie answered at once. Then you reviewed it with your eyes on a screen, not from a hot printer copy. Richard slowly turned his head toward her. A hot printer? The laser printer downstairs, Annie said. The one that printed this copy. It runs very hot. Hot enough to reveal details that do not show clearly on a screen. Martin's smile stiffened. That is absurd. No, Annie said. What's absurd is hiding a line of white text under a chart and hoping everyone only reads the PDF. Eleanor stood up. White text? Annie pointed toward the page, though she still did not touch it. Here. This space looks empty at first glance. But when the paper passes through the printer's heat, the ink and pressure leave a very faint trace. It is not black. It is gray. My mother once showed me how hidden text can appear after printing if someone uses the right formatting and material. Richard scoffed. Your mother? She used to be a legal secretary. Oh, well then, Richard said, spreading his arms and looking around the room with mockery. Stop the signing immediately. The janitor's mother once did office work. Laughter rose again, but this time, it did not travel far. Victor Caldwell had stopped laughing. Martin Graves had gone silent as well. Eleanor Price had begun moving around Richard's chair. Annie stepped a little closer to the table. She placed one slender finger near the bottom right corner of page 8. Richard shot up from his chair. Take your hand off it. Annie did not pull back. You can throw me out of here, she said, looking straight into his eyes. Tomorrow, you will still be an arrogant billionaire. But if you sign that line, No one laughed anymore. Eleanor stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. Show me. Annie gently tilted the page toward the ceiling light. Here, under the chart, it says strategic assumption of subsidiary obligations. It sounds harmless until you read the hidden definition behind it. It expands the subsidiary's obligations to include overdue loans, pending lawsuits, debt from foreign subsidiaries, and personal guarantee exposure after the transaction closes. Richard suddenly turned toward Victor Caldwell. What is this? Caldwell gave a strained smile. It was the kind of smile a man uses when he needs 3 seconds to build a lie. Richard, this is just a misunderstanding. A cleaning girl cannot analyze a document of this scale. Annie spoke before Richard could respond. I didn't analyze the whole contract. I only read the trap. Martin Graves pushed his chair back slightly. That is a dramatic choice of words. No, Annie said. It is an accurate one. Eleanor bent over the page. Her reading glasses slipped low on the bridge of her nose. She looked once, then a second time. Then she shook her head slightly. I don't see anything. Annie reached out and pulled the contract farther under the conference room light. Tilt the paper up. Don't look straight down at it. Look from the left edge. Eleanor hesitated. Richard did not. He snatched the glasses from Eleanor's hand and lowered his face closer to the page. For the first few seconds he said nothing. His lips pressed together. His eyes narrowed. Then the color slowly drained from his face. The line was there, faint, gray against white, almost shy beneath the chart. But it truly existed. Strategic assumption of subsidiary obligations. Richard read on. Overdue loans, pending claims, debt from foreign subsidiaries, personal guarantee exposure. His hand froze on the table, the same hand that had slammed the pen down in front of Annie only minutes earlier. Eleanor leaned closer again. This time, she saw it too. Richard. Martin Graves sprang to his feet. It is only a formatting error, nothing more. Annie turned the page just enough to reveal the reference mark. A formatting error does not lead to Schedule 8F. Eleanor immediately flipped to the end of the document. Her fingers moved quickly across the pages, faster and faster. Then she found the schedule. Her face went pale. Richard lowered his glass onto the table. The pen he had slammed down only minutes before lay near his hand, close enough to remind everyone that he had almost signed the contract. Richard remained motionless, holding the glasses in his hand, the contract tilted beneath the conference room lights. He stared at it as if, by not blinking, the faint gray words might disappear on their own, and everything could return to the smooth signing ceremony it had been arranged to be. But the words were still there, and Schedule 8F at the back of the document was still there too, waiting silently like a locked drawer someone had finally opened. Victor Caldwell was the first to recover. He let out a soft laugh, but it was too small, too dry, and too out of place in the frozen atmosphere of the room. Richard, don't turn this signing ceremony into a farce, Caldwell said. Clearly, this is only a misunderstanding. Richard looked straight at him. A misunderstanding? Yes. Caldwell smoothed his tie with one hand. A printing error, a leftover formatting issue, or whatever your people want to call it. But we cannot allow the words of a little beggar girl to ruin months of work. Annie's shoulders tightened at once. Richard's voice lowered. You heard what she said. I heard a cleaning girl repeating a few legal terms she does not understand. Caldwell replied. And I heard this entire room begin treating it like serious analysis. Annie turned to look at him. I already told you. I did not analyze the whole contract. I only read the trap. Martin Graves quickly stepped in, perhaps realizing that Caldwell had shown too much irritation. Miss Carter, you are making accusations in a private business meeting. Words like that can have serious consequences. Richard immediately turned sharply toward Martin. Careful. Martin raised both hands, trying to appear calm. I am only protecting the integrity of the signing, Mr. Whitmore. This room is full of experts, lawyers from both sides, drafts that have been prepared, revised, marked up, and reviewed for compliance over many months. We cannot allow an unauthorized person to walk in, point at one page, and destroy the entire process. Eleanor Price was still bent over Schedule 8F. She was silent in the familiar way lawyers become silent when they are no longer arguing, but calculating damage. Eleanor, Richard called. She did not look up. Give me a minute. Caldwell leaned forward slightly. His voice softened, becoming smoother, as if he were speaking to an old friend over dinner rather than to a man he had almost tricked into signing a dangerous agreement. Richard, you and I both know how rooms like this work. Pressure creates confusion. A young woman walks in, clearly out of place, makes a dramatic claim, and suddenly everyone starts seeing ghosts on paper. Annie glanced back at the contract. That ghost has a cross-reference. Martin's jaw tightened. Enough. No. Eleanor said. She slowly straightened, holding Schedule 8F in her hand. Not enough. Not even close. Richard took a step toward her. What did you find? Eleanor placed the schedule beside page 8. The hidden line refers to subsidiary obligations. Schedule 8. F lists liabilities belonging to foreign subsidiaries under 3 holding entities, 2 in the Cayman Islands, 1 in Luxembourg. These amounts are not listed as direct debt in the main agreement. They are incorporated by reference. Richard's face hardened. How much? Eleanor checked the numbers again. On paper, the potential exposure exceeds $600 million. With the pending claims included, it could be even higher. A banker at the far end of the room muttered. That cannot be right. Eleanor's voice sharpened. Stopping this signing was absolutely right. Caldwell rose to his feet. This is ridiculous. Richard turned to him. What's ridiculous is hiding $600 million under a chart. Hiding? Caldwell repeated. That is a dangerous accusation. So is personal guarantee exposure. Martin pointed toward Annie, though he did not fully turn to face her. This is exactly the problem. We are using the language of a girl who was never supposed to be in this room. Annie let out a very soft breath. There was a bitterness in her voice that had been held back for too long. You say that as if the truth needs an access badge. A few people lowered their heads. An assistant half closed his laptop, then opened it again, as if he could not decide which choice looked less terrible. Richard did not defend Annie immediately, but he no longer looked at her the way he had before. Eleanor walked toward the large screen, opened the digital copy. A young lawyer sitting nearby hurriedly worked on his laptop. Yes, ma'am. Page 8, Eleanor said. Zoom in under the chart. The contract appeared on the screen. Clean. Normal. No gray line. No warning. Only an empty white space. Caldwell spread his hands. There, your reviewed document. Annie said. Select all the text. The young lawyer stopped and looked at Eleanor. Do it, Eleanor said. He dragged the cursor across the page. At first, nothing changed. Then a thin blue selection box appeared beneath the chart, exactly where Annie had pointed. Silence immediately filled the room, a silence so heavy that even the sound of the air conditioner became clearer. Copy it into a blank document, Annie said. The lawyer did as she told him. A moment later, the black text appeared on the screen. The strategic assumption of subsidiary obligations shall include all disclosed and undisclosed liabilities of foreign subsidiaries, listed or incorporated by reference under Schedule 8F, including overdue debt instruments, pending claims, conversion obligations, and personal guarantee exposure arising upon executive certification at closing. No one laughed anymore. Richard read the sentence once, then he read it again. The second time, he took longer. Eleanor turned to Martin. Was this language in the revision we received last Thursday? Martin answered a little more slowly than he should have. I would need to check. You prepared the final signing copy, Eleanor said. Check your memory first. Caldwell interrupted. Eleanor, This tone is not helping. Neither is fraud. Martin's face tightened. I strongly object to that word. We are not in court, Eleanor replied. Not yet. Richard placed Eleanor's glasses on the table. He looked at Caldwell. In that moment, all the business lunches, charity events, golf weekends, polite emails, and carefully calculated handshakes seemed to fall away. Victor, Richard said, did you know this line was in the copy I was about to sign? Caldwell adjusted his cuff. I know our attorneys worked with yours on a series of complex obligations. That was not my question. That is the only answer I can give before a closer review. Richard stepped closer. You were going to let me sign it. The softness on Caldwell's face disappeared for a moment. You are a very sophisticated man, Richard. You have counsel, you have lenders. You had every opportunity to read the document. Annie spoke quietly, but every word carried across the room. He did read it. He just couldn't read what you deliberately hid. Martin turned to her. Miss Carter, I advise you to stop speaking. Richard looked at Martin. You should not advise her on anything. I advise everyone in this room to remember that she accessed a confidential document. She brought me the final signing copy I requested, Richard said. She touched the agreement. She stopped me from signing it. Annie looked at Richard. For the first time, he had said the truth without trying to cover it. Caldwell noticed it too, and his expression changed. His voice softened again. Richard, let us take a 1-hour break. My team will compare drafts with Eleanor. We will remove any language that causes concern. No harm has been done. No harm? Richard asked. The signing has not taken place. The issue has been found. That is exactly what review is for. Annie almost spoke, but Eleanor spoke first. Review is not supposed to mean discovering a hidden white text clause 10 minutes before signing. Caldwell's eyes shifted to Annie. And yet here we are because an untrained cleaning woman thinks she understands what better people missed. Annie did not step back. Better people? Caldwell smiled faintly. In this room? Yes. Richard looked at Caldwell, then at Annie's worn jacket, her old shoes, and the gray mark still clinging to her fingertip. A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. Eleanor closed the signing binder. This meeting is paused. All copies stay here. Digital access is frozen until my team completes a version comparison. Martin shook his head. You cannot lock us out of our own access. I can suspend execution on behalf of my client, Eleanor said, and I just did. Caldwell buttoned his suit jacket. Richard, be careful. Deals collapse much faster from panic than from clumsy language. Richard pushed the pen farther away from the signature line. Then it is fortunate I did not sign those clumsy words. Caldwell's mouth tightened. You may regret embarrassing a longtime associate over a maid's guess. Annie said, it was not a guess. Caldwell looked at her. You had better hope this attention is worth what comes next. Before Annie could answer, the conference room door opened. Sam Ellis stepped inside, one hand gripping his cane, his breathing heavier than he wanted anyone to notice. His injured leg made each step slow, but his eyes immediately swept the room. Annie standing beside the table, Richard pale, Caldwell angry, and the signing binder closed. What happened? Sam asked. Annie said, Page 8. Sam looked at her, then gave a tired little nod. Your mother always hated Page 8. No one understood the joke except Annie, but it helped steady her. Richard turned to Sam. You told her to bring the file up here. Yes, sir. Why didn't you bring it yourself? Sam tapped the tip of his cane once against the carpet. My leg had other plans. Caldwell let out a cold breath. This is unbelievable. Sam looked at him. Most true things are when you don't plan for them. Eleanor began giving instructions to her staff. Collect every binder. Photograph page 8 under angled light. Preserve any residue on Annie's fingertips if possible. Have it archive the PDF metadata. I want every draft downloaded within the hour. Annie looked down at her hand. My fingers? Eleanor's voice softened slightly. That gray mark may matter. Richard heard that and looked again at the fingers he had wanted removed from the table only minutes earlier. Caldwell moved toward the door, Martin close beside him. As he passed Annie, he lowered his voice. Smart girls should know when silence pays better. Annie's stomach tightened, but Sam was standing beside her. She answered softly. My mother died because silence used to be cheaper. If Annie's words moved you, please like this video. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from, because every voice matters here. And if you believe in truth, courage, and justice for the people no one listens to, please subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories. Caldwell looked directly into her eyes for 1 second. Then he left. Richard remained by the table, his hand near the pen. His face looked older than it had 20 minutes earlier. "Miss Carter," he said. Annie turned back. He seemed to be searching for something to say that would not cost him an apology. "Stay nearby." Annie looked at him, then at the closed signing binder. "I still have a floor to finish." Eleanor almost smiled. "Almost." Sam gently touched Annie's elbow. "Come on." Annie walked out with him, leaving the suffocating glass-walled room behind. In the hallway, the air was a little easier to breathe, though her hands were still shaking. Inside the conference room, Richard Whitmore bent down to look at page 8 again. The elevator doors closed before Annie let herself breathe. For 2 floors, neither she nor Sam said a word. The numbers above the door moved down one by one, slow enough to make every second feel like a question. Annie kept her hands tucked against her jacket, but the faint gray mark on her finger would not let her forget the room, the table, the pen, or the way Richard Whitmore's face had changed when the hidden words appeared. Sam leaned against the elevator wall, trying to hide the pain in his leg. He was not good at hiding much from her. His mouth tightened every time the elevator shifted. "You shouldn't have come up," Annie said. Sam gave her a side glance. "You shouldn't have gone quiet." "I almost did." "I know." The elevator dropped past 35. Annie looked at the steel doors. Her reflection came back dull and bent in the metal. Old denim jacket, tired eyes, hair loosened by the wind, a cleaning badge hanging from her collar. She had spent months moving through this building after office hours, wiping fingerprints from glass doors, emptying trash cans under desks that cost more than her monthly rent, picking up coffee cups left beside marked-up legal drafts. No one upstairs had ever needed to know her name. Now they knew it because she had put her finger on a page. Sam shifted his cane. "Your mama would have had a field day with that room." Annie gave a small breath that almost became a laugh. "She would have told me not to touch the paper. She would have touched it first." That time Annie did laugh, but it broke too soon. The elevator opened on the service level. Warm air from the hallway met them, carrying the smell of floor cleaner, old paper, coffee left too long on a burner, and wet wool from coats hanging near the security desk. It was a different world from the 42nd floor. No leather chairs, no city view, no one speaking in numbers large enough to buy neighborhoods. Sam lowered himself into the chair behind the desk. "Go sit a minute. I have the East Hall to finish." "June's got the East Hall. Mrs. Walker already covered the bathrooms for me yesterday, and she'll cover a hallway today because the good Lord gave her 2 working knees and a mouth that scares supervisors." Sam pointed with his cane toward the small break room. "Sit, Annie." She went because he had climbed 42 floors for her, and refusing felt unkind. The break room had 1 vending machine, a microwave with a cracked handle, a table with 3 mismatched chairs, and a corkboard crowded with old notices. Annie sat with her back to the wall. Only then did she open her hand. The gray mark was still there. She rubbed around it, careful not to touch the center. Eleanor Price had said it might matter. Evidence, maybe. That was what rich people called marks when they appeared in the right room. Down here, a mark was usually dirt, ink, or proof you had been working. Annie reached into the inside pocket of her denim jacket and pulled out her mother's notebook. The cover was black once, but the corners had softened and peeled. A rubber band held it closed because the spine had given up last winter. On the first page, written in blue ink, were the words Martha Carter had said so often that Annie could hear them without reading. "Don't just read what they want you to read. Read what they hope you'll skip." Annie ran her thumb beneath the line, stopping before the gray mark could touch the paper. Her mother had written like she cooked, careful, practical, with no wasted motion. Martha Carter had never had a corner office or a name on a door. At the little legal office on South Cottage Grove, she had sat near the copier, answered phones, scheduled appointments, filed motions, typed letters for attorneys who sometimes forgot to say thank you. But when a contract came in with a strange clause or a client cried over a paper they did not understand, those same attorneys would drift toward Martha's desk. "Martha," they would say, holding out pages. "Can you take a quick look?" A quick look never meant quick. It meant they needed her eyes and did not want to admit it. At home, after long bus rides and late dinners, Martha brought that habit to the kitchen table. She would spread papers beside a chipped bowl of tomato soup or a plate of macaroni and cheese, then tap the page with the back of her pen. "Annie, what do you see?" "Words." Lazy answer. "Small words." "Better. Now." "Why are they small?" "Because they don't want people to read them." Martha would smile then, tired but proud. "Now you're awake." Their apartment had always smelled like laundry soap, old books, and whatever dinner could be stretched for 2 nights. On Fridays, if the paycheck allowed. Martha bought fried chicken from the grocery counter and made Annie read the receipt before they ate. Receipt too? Annie had groaned once. Especially the receipt. A person who can cheat you for $1 can cheat you for a house. Back then, Annie thought her mother was being dramatic. Later, she learned Martha was being gentle. The first hospital bill came with 6 pages and a pale blue envelope. The second came with 12. The insurance letter came with phrases Annie still hated. Excluded service, prior condition, policy limitation, review completed. Martha read the letter 3 times at the kitchen table. Not because she did not understand it, because she did. They found their little door, Martha said. What door? The one they built in case I got sick enough to cost them money. Annie had been 15 then, old enough to know fear, too young to know how to carry it. She watched her mother circle a sentence near the bottom of page 4. The ink shook a little in Martha's hand, but her voice stayed calm. See this? This is where they hid the no. For months after that, the apartment filled with paper, appeal forms, denial letters, payment plans, clinic notices, charity care applications. Martha kept teaching even when her person, eat every breath expensive. If you don't understand a word, circle it, she told Annie from the couch. What if the whole page is words I don't understand? Then circle the whole page and make somebody explain it. One night, after a long shift and a longer bus ride, Martha opened the black notebook and wrote a sentence while Annie washed 2 cups in the sink. Justice isn't always fair, baby. Sometimes it's just the first honest person brave enough to speak. Annie had read it later. After the funeral. When the apartment was half packed and the landlord had already started using a softer voice. The one people use when they are about to do something hard and legal. A knock at the break room door pulled her back. Mrs. June Walker stood there with a foam cup of coffee and a look that could cut through a locked office. She was in her 50s, with gray threaded through her braids and reading glasses on a chain over her uniform. Sam said you were in here, June said. Annie closed the notebook halfway. I'm fine. That's what women say when they're deciding whether to fall apart on their own time. June set the coffee down. Drink. I don't want to get you behind, baby. I've been behind since 1998. Drink. Annie wrapped both hands around the cup, leaving the marked finger lifted. The coffee was too hot and too weak, which meant it was exactly from the security desk. June nodded toward the notebook. Your mama's? Annie nodded. She taught you that thing upstairs? She taught me to look where people don't want to waste time. June pulled out the chair across from her. That man really call you a beggar? Annie looked down. June's jaw set. Of course he did. Men like that can see a missing comma in a billion-dollar clause, but not a whole person standing in front of them. He looked scared at the end. Good. Fear is the first honest feeling some folks ever have. Annie almost smiled. Then her face tightened. They're going to make it about me. June did not pretend not to understand. They already started? The lawyer kept saying I shouldn't have been in the room. Caldwell said they can't rely on a little beggar girl. Like the page changed because I pointed at it. June leaned back. When people can't beat what you said, they start beating who you are. The words settled beside Martha's in Annie's mind. From outside the break room came the sound of phones ringing harder than usual. Shoes moved quickly down the service hall. Somewhere above them, a signing ceremony had turned into something else. Annie knew enough about powerful men to understand they did not forgive embarrassment easily. She opened the notebook again and found a page near the middle. Martha had drawn a box around 4 words. Paper remembers. People deny. Annie stared at that line until the letters blurred. June's voice softened. You did right. I don't know what I did. You read. Annie gave a tired laugh. That's all? June stood, taking the empty sugar packets from the table because she could not pass trash without cleaning it. Sometimes that's the whole war. When June left, Annie sat alone with the coffee cooling between her hands. She thought of Richard Whitmore's pen, Victor Caldwell's smile, Martin Graves telling her to stop speaking. Then she thought of her mother at the kitchen table, tapping a page with the back of a pen and asking the only question that had ever mattered. What do you see? Annie looked down at the gray mark on her finger. For years, she had believed her mother left her a notebook because there was nothing else to leave. No house, no savings, no ring worth selling, just paper and lessons. Now, for the first time, Annie wondered if Martha had left her something sharper than money. Upstairs, Richard Whitmore's people were probably tearing through drafts, schedules, and emails. Caldwell's people were probably choosing which lies would sound cleanest. By morning, Someone would decide whether Annie was a witness, a problem, or a name to erase. She closed the notebook and slipped it back inside her jacket. Then she stood, picked up the mop bucket waiting by the wall, and returned to the hallway. The floor still needed cleaning. The building still expected her to bend down, but Annie Carter no longer felt quite as small when she did. By the time Annie finished the east hallway, the 42nd floor had stopped pretending it was hosting a signing. The first sign came through the service elevator. 2 junior attorneys stepped out carrying boxes of printed drafts, both speaking too fast. Their ties loosened, their phones pressed between shoulder and ear. One of them nearly bumped into Annie's mop bucket and muttered sorry without looking at her. The other looked at the gray mark on her finger, then at her face, then quickly away. Annie kept mopping. That was what people like her did when powerful people panicked. They kept the floors dry, emptied the trash, changed the liners, wiped away fingerprints from doors that led into rooms where other people decided the shape of the world. Upstairs, Richard Whitmore stood at the head of the conference table with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled to the wrist. The ceremonial folders had been replaced by open laptops, marked drafts, yellow legal pads, and 3 separate printed copies of page 8, placed under different lamps. Eleanor Price had taken control of the room with the calm anger of a woman who had just realized someone had tried to make her look careless. "Version history," she said. A junior attorney answered from the screen. "We have the draft from last Thursday, the revised draft from Monday, and the final signing PDF received at 6:12 this morning. Compare page 8 across all 3. Already running? No, not just software. Print them. Same printer, different printer, black and white, color, and hard copy from the closing binder." Richard looked at her. "You think there are more?" "I think people who hide one sentence rarely stop at one." Victor Caldwell had left with Martin Graves, but his presence had not left the room. It sat in the closed leather folders, in the too clean PDF, in the uneasy faces of the bankers who had all been ready to congratulate themselves 20 minutes earlier. Richard picked up the copy Annie had touched. The hidden line looked weaker now until he angled it beneath the light. Then it appeared again, patient and damning. "How did 11 lawyers miss it?" he asked. Eleanor did not soften the answer. "Because we reviewed the digital clean copy. We compared red lines. We trusted the markup. We did not print every exhibit and read it under a light from the side." Richard's mouth tightened, and she did. She noticed something wrong with the paper. "She cleans floors." Eleanor looked at him over her glasses. "Apparently she also reads better than most people in this room did today." No one spoke after that. The junior attorney at the screen cleared his throat. "Miss Price? What?" "The hidden text is not in Thursday's draft. It appears in the final PDF. The text box is set to white. Font size 6. It sits behind the chart layer. Who sent the final PDF?" "Caldwell's counsel." "Martin Graves copied you, Mr. Whitmore, and the closing list." Eleanor held out her hand. "Show me metadata." The attorney clicked. Lines of file information filled the screen. "Modified this morning. Author field blank. Editing software stripped, but one temporary tag remained in the embedded layer. MG, final, 8F. Eleanor's face went still. Richard saw it. "Martin Graves. It would be hard for him to call that a lunch menu," she said. A banker near the end of the table said, "If this gets out before we understand it, the market reaction could be severe." Richard turned on him. "If I had signed it, the reaction would have been worse." The banker closed his mouth. Eleanor flipped to Schedule 8F again. "Look at the names of these entities. Caldwell Baltic Medical Finance, Caldwell Rhine Holdings, Caldwell Astor Overseas. Each one carries debt, claims, or convertible obligations. None of that was in the summary memo." "Our people didn't flag them?" Richard asked. "They were referenced as dormant affiliates, with no material operating exposure." Eleanor tapped the page. That phrase should have made someone sweat. Richard walked to the window. Chicago had become a field of gray and white beyond the glass. He could see nothing clearly out there, which suited the moment. For 30 years, he had built a reputation on reading rooms, reading men, reading risk. That evening, a young woman in a denim jacket had walked in with a delivery file and read the only thing that mattered. He remembered her first words after he insulted her. "I'm not a beggar. Not please. Not excuse me. Not I'm sorry. I'm not a beggar." Richard closed his eyes. And for the first time all day, the contract was not the only document before him. He saw her shoes wetting the carpet. her hand shaking but not moving away from the page. The way she had looked at him when she said he might be sitting beside her on the sidewalk. He opened his eyes. Find her. Eleanor looked up. Now? Yes. She may still be in the building. Richard turned toward the door. Then bring her up. Eleanor held his gaze for a second. Richard, if you intend to offer her money so you can feel less ashamed, don't. That landed harder than he liked. He gave her a cold look, but Eleanor had worked for him too long to be moved by it. I need to ask her what else she saw, he said. And you need to apologize. Richard's jaw set. I know what I need to do. No, Eleanor said. You know what you need from her. That is not the same thing. The room became very quiet again. Richard picked up his suit jacket and walked out without answering. Downstairs, Annie was rinsing the mop head in the utility sink when her supervisor, Mr. Kellerman, appeared in the doorway with a phone in his hand, and anxiety pinched into his forehead. Annie. She turned off the water. Yes, sir? You were upstairs? Her stomach tightened. I brought a file. Mr. Whitmore is asking for you. June Walker, who had been restocking paper towels from a cart, looked over sharply. Asking how? I don't know, June. I just got the call. Annie dried her hands slowly, careful around the gray mark. Am I fired? Kellerman looked uncomfortable. Nobody said that. That's not an answer. No, he said, softer. Not fired. They just want you upstairs. June stepped between them a little. She doesn't go anywhere alone. Kellerman sighed. June. No, I said what I said. Before he could respond, Sam came down the hallway with his cane, moving slower now but with his shoulders squared. I'll take her. Annie looked at him. Mr. Sam, your leg. My leg has had a full evening of opinions. It can have one more. They rode up together. This time the elevator felt smaller. Annie watched the numbers climb and wiped her palms on her jacket, then stopped herself. Evidence. Eleanor had said the mark might matter. When the doors opened on 42, the hallway was busy. People who had ignored her an hour ago now stepped aside. Not warmly, not kindly, but carefully, as if she were carrying something breakable. Richard was waiting outside the conference room. Without the table between them, he looked less like a headline and more like a tired man trying not to show it. Miss Carter, he said. Annie noticed the name this time. Miss Carter. Not Beggar. Not cleaning girl. Sam stood beside her, silent. Richard looked at the gray mark on her finger, then at her face. We confirmed part of what you said. Only part? Eleanor came to the doorway behind him. Enough to suspend the signing. Annie nodded once. Then you don't need me. Richard inhaled. I need to know how you saw it. I told you. The paper was wrong. That's not enough. It was enough when I pointed at it. Eleanor almost smiled. Richard glanced back at the conference room, where his people were still tearing through the deal. When he turned to Annie again, the pride in his face had not vanished, but it had lost some of its shine. I was wrong to speak to you the way I did. The hallway stilled around them. Even people pretending to work heard it. Annie did not rush to rescue him from the silence. Richard continued, each word costing him more than the last. You came up here because I asked for a document. I saw your clothes, your job, and your race before I saw you. That was on me. Sam's hand tightened around his cane. Annie's throat moved, but she held her voice steady. You said I'd stain your deal. Richard looked down. Yes. I didn't stain it. No, he said. You showed me where it was already dirty. For the first time, Annie looked into his face and saw more than fear. She saw shame, fresh and unfamiliar, like a man wearing a suit that did not fit. Eleanor stepped in gently. Annie, we need to preserve your finger transfer, if you'll allow it. Then I'd like you to walk me through exactly what you noticed. Not for him, for the record. Annie looked at Sam. He gave her a small nod. Your call. Inside the conference room, Richard's pen still lay beside the unsigned signature tab. Caldwell's empty chair waited across the table. Page 8 sat under a lamp. Annie looked at the page, then at Richard. I'll show Miss Price, she said, but I'm not staying to be laughed at again. Richard did not defend the room. He only stepped aside. No one laughs, he said. Annie walked past him into the room, her old sneakers quiet on the carpet. This time, nobody joked about housekeeping. This time, when she reached the table, every lawyer leaned in to hear what the girl from the service floor had seen. Annie did not sit at the conference table. Eleanor Price offered her a chair twice, first with a hand gesture, Then with a softer, "Please, Annie." Both times Annie stayed standing beside the lamp with her mother's notebook tucked inside her jacket and Sam near the door like a quiet witness. "I can explain it faster from here," she said. Richard stood at the far end of the table, not in his usual seat. Maybe he had noticed she did not want him sitting above her. Maybe Eleanor had. Either way, no one told Annie where to stand now, and that alone made the room feel different. Eleanor placed 3 printed versions of page 8 side by side. "Show me exactly what caught your eye." Annie pointed to the blank area under the chart. "The bottom spacing. It's too heavy." One of the young attorneys leaned closer. "Too heavy how?" Annie glanced at him. He had been one of the people who laughed earlier. His face had the careful look of a man trying to act as if he had not. "Paper has rhythm," Annie said. "When a page is clean, your eye moves through it without stopping." But this part pulled, like there was something underneath. The attorney frowned. "That's not a legal standard." "No," Annie said. "It's a reading habit." Eleanor gave the attorney a look that ended his next sentence before it left his mouth. "Go on." Annie turned the first copy. "This is the one from downstairs." The heat made the hidden line show faintly. "This one from your office printer is cleaner. This third one from the PDF looks empty. Unless you select the text. That means someone designed the digital copy to pass review." Richard's mouth tightened. "Someone." Eleanor heard the anger in that single word. "We prove before we accuse. You saw the metadata. I saw a tag that points toward Martin Graves. That is not the same as a complete record." Annie looked from one to the other. "If he hid this line, there may be more than one." Eleanor nodded. "That is what I'm afraid of." For the next 40 minutes, Annie walked Eleanor through what she noticed. Not legal theories, not deal structure, just what her eyes caught. A page number that looked too close to the margin. A chart title aligned 1 point lower than the others. A footnote marker with no visible footnote. A schedule reference tucked beside a comma instead of a clause number. Small things. Things people skipped when coffee was cold, deadlines were close, and everyone in the room believed the expensive lawyers had already done the reading. Richard listened without interrupting. That was new. At one point, a banker whispered to another, "We need to know whether the closing can be salvaged." Annie heard it. So did Richard. He turned. The closing was almost a coffin. "Stop talking about salvaging it." The banker went silent. Eleanor closed the folder at last. "Annie, I need your finger photographed before the transfer fades. After that, you can go." Annie looked at the gray mark. "Photographed? It may help establish contact with the printed hidden text." Richard stepped forward. "We can compensate you for your time." Sam's cane tapped once against the carpet. Annie looked at Richard. "No." He stopped. "No? I'm still on the clock downstairs. If you want to pay someone for my time, pay the cleaning company so they don't dock me." Richard's face worked through confusion, then embarrassment. "Of course. And pay Mrs. Walker if she covered my haul." Eleanor looked down, hiding a small smile behind a cough. Richard nodded. "Done." Annie extended her hand to Eleanor, not Richard. Eleanor called a paralegal, who photographed the gray mark under a desk lamp, then sealed a cotton swab in a small evidence sleeve. The whole thing made Annie feel strange. Her hands had cleaned bathrooms, carried trash, scrubbed gum from tile. No one had ever treated them like they held proof of anything. When it was finished, she stepped back. "Can I leave now?" Richard looked at her as if he wanted to say 5 things and trusted none of them. "Yes," Eleanor said for him. "Thank you, Annie." Annie picked up her cleaning badge from where it had twisted against her jacket. "You're welcome, Miss Price." She and Sam left the room together. This time the hallway did not feel easier. It felt watched. Assistants moved aside. A few people offered polite nods. Too late. And too careful. Annie did not return them. She had no energy left for making other people feel forgiven. In the elevator, Sam leaned both hands on his cane. "You held yourself well," he said. "I wanted to shake." "You did shake." She gave him a tired look. He shrugged. "Holding yourself well doesn't mean pretending your knees are made of steel. It means standing anyway." Downstairs, June had finished the East Hall and half of the lobby. She saw Annie and walked straight over. "You still employed?" "So far. Good. I was ready to become unpleasant." Sam snorted. "Ready?" June ignored him and handed Annie a wrapped sandwich from the break room refrigerator. "Eat." "I'm not hungry." "Eat nervous then." Annie took it because arguing with June took more strength than she had. Her shift ended after midnight. Outside, Chicago was still cold enough to make breath visible. Sam insisted on waiting with her near the service entrance until the late bus came. "You don't have to," Annie said. "I know." His coat collar was turned up, his bad legs stiff in the cold. Across the street, office lights burned in the tower like rows of sleepless eyes. Annie unwrapped the sandwich and took one bite. Turkey, mustard, too much lettuce. It tasted like something made by a person who expected her to make it through the night. "Mr. Sam? Ma'am, what happens now?" He looked toward the upper floors. "Now, rich men call lawyers. Lawyers call other lawyers. Everybody says, review, until somebody finds a cleaner word for fear. That's not an answer. It's the only honest one I've got. The bus was late." A taxi pulled up near the curb, then drove away when no one in a suit came out. Annie watched the taillights fade into the snow. "I don't want them using my name," she said. Sam nodded slowly. "They might try. I didn't ask for any of this." "No, you carried a folder. I should have just put it down." Sam turned to her. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Punish yourself for seeing." Annie looked away. Sam's voice lowered. "Your mama didn't raise you to walk past a knife on the floor and hope the next person had good shoes." That landed where he meant it to. The bus finally came, sighing at the curb. Annie stepped up, then looked back. Sam lifted 2 fingers in a small goodnight. She found a seat near the middle, pressed her shoulder against the cold window, and watched Harrington and Vale slide away behind her. By the time she reached her rented room on the south side, her phone had 3 missed calls from an unknown number and 1 text from Mrs. Walker. "Don't answer strangers tonight. Sleep first." Annie locked the door, set her mother's notebook on the small table, and sat on the edge of the bed without turning on the lamp. Her room was narrow, with a radiator that knocked when it felt like working and a ceiling stain shaped like a map no one would want to follow. On the chair lay her GED workbook, open to a math section she had planned to finish before work. She looked at the notebook. For a long time, she did not touch it. Then she opened to the first page and read her mother's handwriting again. "Read what they hope you'll skip." Annie thought about Richard Whitmore, about the way his voice had changed when he said her name. She thought about Caldwell's smooth warning near the door. Clever girls should learn when silence pays better. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She let it ring until it stopped. Then another text came, this time from Sam. "You did right. Lock your door. Call me if anything feels off." Annie typed back, "I'm okay." She erased it. Then she typed, "I'm scared." She almost erased that too, but her thumb hit send before pride could stop her. A minute later, Sam replied, "Scared means you understand the size of it. Brave means you'll sleep anyway." Annie placed the phone face down, took off her denim jacket, and folded it over the chair. The gray mark on her finger had faded, but not completely. Up on the 42nd floor, they were probably still reading. Richard's lawyers would search for more hidden lines. Caldwell's lawyers would search for a way out. Men with clean hands would decide what to call the dirty thing they had found. Annie turned off the light and lay down, but sleep did not come quickly. Because somewhere in that contract, on page 8, a door had opened. And Annie knew enough about doors in legal papers to know they rarely led to only one room. By morning, Annie's name had already traveled farther than she had. It moved through security desks, legal offices, elevators, text messages, and whispered guesses over paper cups of coffee. Some people said she had saved Whitmore Global. Some said she had embarrassed Richard Whitmore in front of a major partner. Others had no idea what happened, only that the signing had been stopped, and the girl from the cleaning crew was the reason. Annie heard the whispers before she reached the service entrance. 2 paralegals stood near the revolving doors, coats still buttoned, voices low. "She's the one?" "I think so. She found it just by looking." "That's what they're saying." Annie kept walking. Her denim jacket was dry now but still creased from the night before. Her hair was tied back tighter than usual. In her pocket, her mother's notebook pressed against her ribs with every step. She had slept maybe 2 hours, and even that sleep had come in pieces. Full of conference lights, gray ink, and Caldwell's voice telling her silence paid better. At the security desk, Sam looked up from his monitor. He had shaved, polished his shoes, and put on his tie straight, though his eyes showed he had not slept much either. "You came," he said. "I work here." "Not what I meant." Annie set her bag under the desk where she always left it during her shift. Did they say anything? Sam nodded toward the lobby. They're gathering people at 9. For what? Mr. Whitmore called it himself. Annie's stomach tightened. Called what? Before Sam could answer, Mrs. June Walker came through the side hall carrying a stack of clean rags. A public apology, if that man has sense. A public performance, if he doesn't. Annie looked toward the elevators. I don't want to stand up there while people look at me. June lowered the rags onto the counter. Baby, they already looked yesterday. Today they can listen. At 5 minutes to 9, the lobby began to fill. Lawyers came down from the upper floors. Assistants stood near the marble pillars with phones in hand but uncertain whether recording would be welcome. Security guards gathered near the front desk. Members of Richard's team stepped out of the elevators in dark suits. Even a few night cleaners stayed past their shift, arms folded, faces guarded. Annie remained beside Sam at the edge of the room, half hidden by the security desk. Richard Whitmore came down last. He wore the same navy suit from the day before, but he looked less arranged. No bright tie. No prepared smile. Eleanor Price walked beside him with a folder under one arm, her expression steady. Richard stopped at the center of the lobby, not on the raised reception platform, not behind a podium, just on the floor where everyone else stood. The room quieted. Richard looked once toward Annie. She did not move closer. He cleared his throat. Yesterday afternoon, in a conference room on the 42nd floor, a young woman entered carrying a file I had requested. She did not interrupt my meeting for attention. She did not come to ask me for anything. She came because Mr. Samuel Ellis, a guard in this building, was in pain and could not bring the file himself. Sam's jaw tightened, but he kept his eyes forward. Richard continued. I saw her clothes. I saw the work badge on her jacket. I saw her race before I saw her purpose. And before I knew her name, I called her a beggar. No one shifted now. Even the people who had not been in the room seemed to feel the word land on the floor. Richard turned fully toward Annie. Her name is Annie Carter. Annie felt every eye move to her. But this time Richard did not let the room linger there. Say it correctly, he said. Remember it correctly. Because Annie Carter saw a hidden clause on page 8 of a $900 million agreement that my own team missed, my outside counsel missed, and I was seconds away from signing. Eleanor's face did not change, though one of the younger attorneys behind her looked down at his shoes. Richard took a breath. I humiliated her. Some of you laughed. Some of you stayed quiet. Silence helped me think I had the right to keep going. I did not. A phone lowered near the back of the lobby. Richard looked at Sam next. Mr. Ellis, you did your job yesterday better than I did mine. You trusted the right person. I owe you an apology, as well. Sam nodded once. Accepted if it comes with better chairs at the desk. A small, nervous laugh moved through the lobby. Even Richard's mouth twitched for half a second. It will, Richard said. And medical support for your leg. Paid by Whitmore Global. Not deducted from anything. Not buried in paperwork. Sam's expression softened, but only a little. Put it in writing. I already did. Eleanor lifted the folder. June whispered beside Annie. Well, I'll be. Richard turned back to the room. From this point forward, no employee, contractor, guard, cleaner, clerk, assistant, or visitor in any Whitmore-managed space is to be treated as invisible because their name is not on a door. I failed that standard yesterday. You all watched me fail it. I expect you to remember that before you copy it. The lobby stayed quiet. Then he stepped toward Annie. Annie wanted to move back, but June's hand touched her elbow, light and brief. Richard stopped a few feet away, leaving space between them. Miss Carter, he said, lower now, but still loud enough for the room to hear. I am sorry. For the word I used. For the way I spoke to you. For making a room full of people feel safe laughing at you. And for needing your help before I was willing to see your dignity. Annie's throat tightened. She had imagined, during those 2 broken hours of sleep, that an apology from a man like Richard Whitmore would feel like victory. It did not. It felt heavy. It felt late. It felt like standing beside a wound, while someone finally admitted he had made it. She nodded once. I hear you. Richard seemed to understand that this was not the same as forgiveness. Thank you, he said. Then Eleanor stepped forward. Annie, if you're willing, I'd like you upstairs at 10. Paid time, not cleaning time. Document, review time. A low murmur moved through the lobby. Annie looked at her. I'm not a lawyer. No, Eleanor said. You're the reason we still have something for the lawyers to review. Richard added, this is not charity. Annie's eyes cut to him. It better not be. He accepted that. Temporary consulting assignment. Written terms. Hourly pay. You can refuse. June leaned near Annie's ear. Don't refuse good money just to punish his pride. Annie almost smiled. Sam said, read the terms first. That time, more people laughed, and the sound did not feel cruel. Annie looked at Eleanor. I'll read it. Good answer, Eleanor said. The gathering broke slowly. People did not rush back to work the way they usually did after an announcement. Some approached Sam to shake his hand. A few came near Annie, then thought better of it when June's face warned them not to arrive with soft guilt and empty phrases. One young attorney, the same one who had made the housekeeping joke, stopped several feet away. Miss Carter, he said, stiff with shame. I laughed yesterday. I shouldn't have. Annie looked at him for a moment. No, you shouldn't have. He nodded. I'm sorry. She did not make it easier for him. Okay. He left with his face red. June watched him go. That's how apologies should feel. Uncomfortable. At 10, Eleanor brought Annie to a smaller conference room on the 36th floor, not the glass room from yesterday. On the table sat a short written agreement. 4 pages, large print, plain language. Annie read every line. The pay rate made her blink, but she kept her face still. She circled one phrase. What does as needed mean? She asked. Eleanor smiled. It means I was lazy. We'll change it to a fixed schedule, unless you approve extra hours. Annie looked up. Then I'll sign. Richard stood near the window but said nothing. When Annie picked up the pen, he watched her hand more carefully than he had watched his own the day before. She signed her name slowly. Annie Carter. Not the cleaning girl, not the beggar, not the interruption. Anama in ink. Eleanor slid the first stack of documents toward her. Start with Schedule 8, F. Annie opened her mother's notebook beside the contract, not to show off, not for drama, but because that was how she read when the paper mattered. Richard saw the worn cover. Is that hers? Annie did not look up. My mother's. What was her name? Martha Carter. He repeated it quietly, as if the name itself deserved care. Martha Carter. Annie turned the first page of the schedule. If you want to honor her, Mr. Whitmore, don't say her name nicely. Read what she taught me to read. For once, Richard did exactly as he was told. By noon, Annie had read Schedule 8F twice and eaten nothing but half a pack of crackers from June Walker's purse. The conference room on the 36th floor had no grand view, only a narrow window facing the side of another building. Eleanor Price had chosen it on purpose. No ceremony, no long table built to intimidate. Just 4 chairs, a printer, a speakerphone, and stacks of paper that smelled faintly of toner. Annie sat with her mother's notebook open beside her and a pencil in her hand. She had refused a tablet. I read better on paper, she told Eleanor. Eleanor did not argue. So do I. That small agreement did more than either of them said. Across the table, 2 young attorneys worked through draft comparisons. One of them, Mark Delaney, kept glancing at Annie's notes as if expecting them to be mine. They were not. Annie wrote in tight lines. Page number 1st, issue 2nd, question 3rd. No decoration, no wasted words. Richard came in just after lunch with his tie loosened and a phone in his hand. Anything? Eleanor held up one finger without looking up. Let her finish. Richard stopped near the door. Yesterday, he would have spoken over the room until everyone moved faster. Today, he put the phone away and waited. Annie turned a page. This company here, she said, tapping the 3rd schedule. Caldwell Astor Overseas. Mark leaned in. What about it? It appears again on page 42 as Astor Overseas Holdings. No Caldwell in the name. That happens, Mark said. Short form reference. Annie looked at him. Then why does the address change? He blinked. What? She slid the 2 pages across. Here it's listed in Luxembourg. Here it's listed through a registered office in the Cayman Islands. Same director. Different debt note. Same maturity date. Eleanor pulled the pages toward her. Mark, check the entity list. Mark opened his laptop, his fingers moving faster now. Give me a second. Annie did not wait. She turned another page. There's also a currency problem. Richard stepped closer. Currency? This table says the debt is in euros. She pointed. But the footnote says all amounts are converted from US dollars using the previous quarter exchange rate. If that's true, this number shouldn't end in around 5 million. Converted debt almost never lands that clean. Eleanor's eyes sharpened. Mark? Mark was already typing. She's right. The euro figure should be different. Either the table is rounded without saying so, or the number was copied from another schedule. Annie shook her head. Not copied. Planted. The room went quiet. Richard looked at her. Why? Because round numbers calm people down, Annie said. My mother used to say a clean number is sometimes a dirty number wearing church shoes. Eleanor gave a short laugh before she could stop herself. I would have liked your mother. Annie's face softened for half a second. Most people did after they stopped underestimating her. Mark cleared his throat. The director name matches across both Astor entities. Thomas Greer. Annie wrote the name in her notebook. Who is that? Eleanor frowned. Registered agent, maybe. Outside counsel? I don't know yet. Richard looked at the name as if it had already cost him money. Find out. Mark nodded. On it. For the next 2 hours, the room settled into a rhythm. Eleanor asked legal questions. Mark checked databases. Another associate. Priya Nair. Tracked draft changes. Richard came and went, taking calls in the hallway and returning with worse news each time. Caldwell's team was refusing to provide native files. The banks wanted reassurance. A board member had asked whether Richard had lost control of the process, which Annie understood to mean, why did you let a girl with a mop stop a rich man's deal? No one said that in front of her. They did not have to. At 3 o'clock, Priya pushed back from her laptop and rubbed her eyes. I need coffee. Richard said, get whatever everyone wants. Annie kept reading. Priya paused at the door. Annie? I'm okay. That wasn't the question. Coffee? Annie looked up, surprised by the normalness of it. Black. 2 sugars, if they have it. Priya smiled. They have sugar on this floor. We're not animals. When she left, Mark leaned back in his chair. Can I ask you something? Eleanor said. Carefully. Mark looked embarrassed. How did you learn to read like this? Annie kept her pencil on the page. I told you. My mother. No, I mean, this. He gestured toward the schedules. The formatting. The numbers. The way you notice when something feels off. Annie thought about the kitchen table, the soup cans, the stack of envelopes with red print. Her mother's hand circling words while pretending not to be tired. When a mistake can cost you heat in February, you read different, she said. When a sentence can decide if your mother gets treatment, you don't skim. Mark looked down. I'm sorry. Annie did not know what to do with that kind of apology. It was not aimed at something he had done. It was aimed at a world he had not had to study. Eleanor saved them both. Back to work. Priya returned with coffee and a paper bag from a deli downstairs. I got sandwiches. Turkey. Roast beef. Veggie. Annie hesitated. Priya noticed. Company card. Eat before you start seeing hidden clauses in the napkins. Annie took turkey. Thank you. Richard watched that exchange from the doorway. Something in his face shifted when Annie unwrapped the sandwich slowly. As if accepting food in a room like this required permission she did not want to need, he said, There will be dinner brought in later. Annie looked at him. I have a shift tonight. Eleanor shook her head. Not tonight. Your consulting agreement has you here until 6, and then you go home. My cleaning supervisor has been informed, Richard said. Paid. And Mrs. Walker? Paid as well. Annie nodded once and returned to the document. Good. Mark hid a smile. Near 5, Annie found the first real crack after page 8. It sat inside an appendix marked Disclosure Confirmation. A harmless title, if anyone had ever made one. The paragraph confirmed that all foreign affiliate obligations had been fully scheduled or incorporated by operational reference. Annie circled operational reference 3 times. Eleanor leaned over. What bothers you? That phrase doesn't sound like the rest of the document. Because everything else says by reference. This says operational reference, like they needed a second door. Priya searched the document. Operational reference appears only twice. Here, and in an exhibit index. Open the index, Eleanor said. Priya did. There it was. Operational reference file. Or 17. Unavailable in printed binder. Accessible by secure data room. Richard's voice flattened. We didn't receive OR 17. Mark checked the closing log. Caldwell marked it as non-material supporting data. Eleanor's face hardened. Request it now. Richard picked up his phone. No. Demand it. Annie sat back. Her eyes burned. For the first time all day, fear returned in a clean line. Page 8 was not a mistake. It was not even the whole trap. It was the string hanging from the wall. OR 17 was behind the wall. Richard made the call on speaker. Martin Graves answered after 3 rings. Richard, I assume you've calmed down. Richard looked at Eleanor, then at Annie's circled phrase. Send OR 17. A pause. I'm sorry? Operational reference file 17. Send it now. That file is not material to closing. Then you won't mind sending it. Martin's voice cooled. We'll review the request. Richard ended the call. No one spoke. Then Eleanor said, He's scared. Annie closed her pencil inside the notebook to mark the page. No. He's buying time. Richard looked at her. For what? Annie remembered Caldwell's parting words, the way he had lowered his voice near the door. Clever girls should learn when silence pays better. I don't know yet, she said, but she knew enough to feel the shape of it. Caldwell had not lost the deal, not in his mind. He had only lost the first room. At 6, Eleanor collected Annie's marked pages and placed them in a separate folder with her name on it. Carter Review Notes. The label looked strange, official, too clean for what it meant. Richard walked Annie and Sam to the elevator. He did not try small talk. At the doors, he said, Miss Carter. Thank you. Annie looked at him. Don't thank me yet. Why not? Because if they hid OR 17, they're not done. The elevator opened. Sam stepped in first. Richard held the door with one hand. Are you coming back tomorrow? Annie looked down at her denim sleeve, at the faint chemical stains that would never wash out, then back at the billionaire who had learned to ask instead of order. I'll read the agreement first, she said. Eleanor, standing behind Richard, almost smiled again. Already drafted. Annie stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, she saw Richard turn back toward the conference room, where the papers waited and the clean numbers had begun to look dirty. Downstairs, Sam leaned against the wall and sighed. You know what your problem is? Annie looked at him. I only get one? You keep finding doors. She touched the notebook in her pocket. No, she said. They keep hiding them. The next morning, OR 17 did not arrive. What arrived instead was a headline. Annie saw it on Mrs. Walker's phone while they stood beside the service elevator, sharing coffee that tasted older than the building. Cleaning girl halts $900, million Whitmore deal after boardroom outburst. June read it once, then moved the phone away from Annie's face. Nope, we're not starting the day with poison. Annie took the phone gently and looked anyway. The article had no author photo, only a business news logo and a paragraph written to sound careful while doing damage. It said Richard Whitmore had suspended a major acquisition after an emotional interruption by a member of the evening cleaning staff. It said sources close to Caldwell International believed the delay resulted from confusion over formatting language already disclosed in prior drafts. It said the young woman, identified only as Annie C., had no legal training. No mention of page 8, no mention of white font, no mention of Schedule 8F. June watched her read. They got your name? Half of it. That's worse. Makes you sound like a rumor. Sam came from the security desk, cane tapping harder than usual. Let me see. June handed him the phone. His face did not change much, but Annie knew him well enough to see anger settle behind his eyes. They're trying to make it about how you walked in, he said. Not what you found. Annie gave the phone back. That was always going to happen. No, June said. Don't make peace with it just because you saw it coming. Before Annie could answer, the elevator opened and Eleanor Price stepped out with Priya behind her. Eleanor wore a gray coat over yesterday's black suit, and her hair was pinned tighter than usual. Annie, she said, come upstairs. Annie's stomach tightened. Because of the article? Because of that. And because Caldwell still hasn't produced OR 17. Sam moved beside Annie. She eats first. Eleanor blinked. June lifted the paper bag in her hand. Biscuit sandwich. She didn't have breakfast. Eleanor looked at Annie, then at the bag. Bring it. Upstairs, the 36th floor conference room had changed overnight. More boxes, more printouts, 2 extra attorneys, a whiteboard listing draft versions by date. On the far side, Richard Whitmore stood with his phone against his ear, not speaking, only listening. When he saw Annie, he ended the call. You saw it? He asked. Yes. It's false. Annie set her bag down. It's not completely false. I do clean. Richard looked ashamed before he looked angry. That's not what I meant. I know what you meant. Eleanor placed a printed copy of the article on the table. Caldwell's media team is feeding this language. Emotional interruption. No legal training. Formatting confusion. They're building a story before we finish building the record. Priya opened her laptop. It's already been picked up by 3 business blogs. Mark Delaney, looking like he had slept in his shirt, added. A morning cable segment used the phrase janitor theory. June, who had come up without asking permission, put the biscuit sandwich in front of Annie. Say that again while I'm standing here. Mark held up both hands. I'm quoting them, Mrs. Walker. Then quote better people. Richard turned to Eleanor. Can we respond? We can, but carefully. If we accuse Caldwell publicly before the version audit is finished, they'll claim defamation and distraction. Right now, we preserve evidence and demand 17 again. Annie unwrapped the sandwich but did not eat. They're not sending it. Eleanor looked at her. Why do you say that? Because if it helped them, you'd already have it. Richard's mouth tightened. She's right. Eleanor picked up a folder. Caldwell sent something else instead. A letter claiming Annie may have accessed privileged transaction materials without authorization, and that any review based on her observation is contaminated. Annie's fingers stopped on the paper wrapper. Sam's voice lowered. Contaminated? Richard said. They're trying to make her the problem. June let out a short laugh with no humor. Trying? Eleanor sat across from Annie, not at the head of the table. Listen to me carefully. You did not steal a document. You were asked to deliver a file. You noticed something on a page in plain view. That matters. Martin Graves' letter lay on the table, crisp and formal. Annie did not touch it. Will they say I stole it anyway? Yes, Eleanor said. Richard shot her a look. Eleanor did not soften it. She deserves the truth. Annie finally took a bite of the sandwich. It was warm, with egg and cheese and too much pepper. For a moment, the normal taste of food steadied her better than anyone's reassurance. What do they want? She asked. Eleanor hesitated. Richard answered. They want me to proceed with the signing after a technical cleanup. Annie looked up. You're not. No. Then what do they really want? No one answered fast enough. Priya turned her laptop around. On the screen was another post, this one from an anonymous account with a few thousand followers. Who is Annie C? Sources say Whitmore's new advisor has a history of instability and was never cleared for access to deal documents. Annie read the sentence twice. Instability. She could feel the word trying to crawl under her skin. June reached for the laptop and turned it away. That is filth, Mark said. It gets worse. Someone is digging. They found your GED enrollment. Annie's face went still. That's public? Not easily, Mark said. But enough can be found if someone wants to make a point. Sam's hand closed around the top of his cane. She is not a point. Richard walked to the window, then back. I'll put out a statement. Full name. Full credit. Page 8. Hidden text. No ambiguity. Eleanor shook her head. You can't disclose contract details publicly yet. Then what can I say? That we suspended the signing pending document irregularities. That no employee or contractor should be harassed. That we stand by our process. June snorted. That sounds like a machine apologizing to another machine. Richard looked at Annie. What do you want said? The room turned to her again. Annie hated that question. Not because it was unfair, but because part of her wanted to say nothing. Part of her wanted to go back downstairs, finish her shift, ride the bus home, open her GED workbook, and become unknown again. But unknown had never protected her mother. Don't call me brave, she said. Richard frowned. What? That's what people say when they want the story to feel nice. Don't call me inspiring. Don't say I had a dream. Don't say I came from nowhere. I came from my mother. I came from work. Say the document had hidden language and I pointed it out. Eleanor wrote as Annie spoke. Annie continued, "And say Mr. Sam didn't do anything wrong." Richard nodded. "Done." Sam looked away, but not before Annie saw his eyes shine. By noon, Whitmore Global released a short statement. It did not satisfy anyone, because the truth rarely fits into corporate language. The market still reacted. Calls came in. Board members demanded updates. Caldwell's team refused OR 17 again, this time saying the file was administratively unavailable. Eleanor read the email aloud and laughed once. Administratively unavailable. That's a new dress on an old lie. Annie had gone back to the schedules. Her pencil moved down a column of entity names until it stopped. "Miss Price?" Eleanor came over. Annie tapped a name near the bottom. "Thomas Greer again." Priya pulled her chair closer. "Where?" "Here." "Registered contact for Caldwell Rhine Holdings." Mark searched. Same name appears in the metadata notes from the Scholarship Foundation database. Annie looked at him. "What Scholarship Foundation?" Mark froze. Eleanor's eyes cut toward him. Richard spoke from the doorway. "What foundation?" Mark looked uncomfortable. It came up in a background scan. "Future Door Scholarship Fund. It has a registered agent named Thomas Greer." "I didn't think it mattered yet." Annie's chest tightened, though she did not know why. "Why were you scanning scholarship foundations?" Eleanor answered before Mark could make it worse. "Because Caldwell is digging into you. We started looking for anything connected to their network that might be used to approach you." June, who had been sorting extra copies into stacks, went still. "Approach her how?" Eleanor's phone rang before she could answer. She looked at the number, then at Richard. "Unknown caller, routed through reception." They asked for Annie Carter. The room lost its motion. Annie stared at the phone. Sam said, "Don't take it." Eleanor said, "Put it on speaker. Say nothing beyond hello." Richard moved closer but kept his distance. Eleanor answered, "This is Eleanor Price." A woman's voice came through, warm and practiced. "Miss Price, my name is Caroline Webb. I'm calling from Future Door Scholarship Fund. We're hoping to speak with Annie Carter about an opportunity that could change her life." No one moved. Annie looked at the page under her hand, at the name Thomas Greer, then at Eleanor's phone. The woman continued, sweet as poured syrup. "We saw Annie's story, and we believe a young woman like her deserves a path forward. Tuition, housing, mentoring. No strings that would burden her. Just support." June whispered, "Lord, they work fast." Eleanor's face had gone cold. "Send the materials to my office. We'd prefer to speak with Annie directly." "I'm sure you would." There was a pause, still polite. "Miss Price, this is a generous offer." Annie reached across the table and tapped the mute button off before anyone could stop her. "This is Annie," she said. The woman brightened. "Annie, sweetheart, I'm so glad. You don't know me, but I think you and I should talk about your future." Annie looked at Thomas Greer's name on the schedule. "My future reads contracts first," she said. Then she muted the call again. For the first time that day, Richard smiled, not with amusement, but with something like respect. Eleanor ended the call and leaned back. "They're circling." Annie picked up her pencil. "No," she said, writing Thomas Greer's name for the second time that day. "They're scared." Future Door sent the packet in less than 20 minutes. It arrived by email as if someone had been waiting with a finger over the button. Eleanor printed one copy for herself and one for Annie, then laid the pages on the table without sliding them too close. "Read at your pace," she said. Annie did not answer. She pulled the first page toward her and flattened it with both hands. The letterhead was soft blue. The logo showed an open door with sunlight behind it. The words were chosen like flowers for a funeral. Opportunity, dignity, promise, leadership, community. Annie had seen that kind of language before. Her mother used to call it perfume on a locked box. Caroline Webb's cover letter began with Annie's remarkable courage, then moved quickly into what the foundation wanted to offer. Full tuition at a college of Annie's choice, housing assistance, a monthly living stipend, professional clothing, mentoring, legal career preparation, and access to a network of high-impact leaders. June Walker read over Annie's shoulder for one paragraph, then folded her arms. That is a lot of honey for someone they met on the phone. Sam stood near the door. Honey draws flies, too. Richard did not sit. He paced once, stopped, then forced himself still. "Can they legally do this?" Eleanor looked up from her copy. Offer money? Yes. Offer money to influence a witness? That depends on what page 11 says. Annie had already turned to page 11. The print was smaller there. The tone changed too. Less honey. More wire. She read the first paragraph, then the second. Her face gave nothing away, but her pencil began to move. Priya leaned closer. What did you find? Annie circled a phrase. Public cooperation. Eleanor came around the table. Read it out. Annie read, slowly. Recipient agrees to provide reasonable public cooperation in connection with any media, legal, educational, or institutional communication deemed beneficial by the Foundation or its affiliated partners. Mark let out a low breath. Affiliated partners. Annie turned the page. They define that on page 14. Eleanor flipped. Of course they do. Annie found the definition and tapped it. Affiliated partners includes donors, strategic sponsors, legal representatives, investment partners, and any entity sharing administrative, charitable, or advisory services with the Foundation. Richard's voice hardened. That's Caldwell. Maybe, Eleanor said. Keep reading. Annie did. The room waited. Phones buzzed and went unanswered. Outside the window, Chicago kept moving, careless and cold. On page 17, Annie stopped again. This time she did not circle the line. She underlined it twice. What? Richard asked. Annie's voice stayed calm. They own my story. June took a step forward. What do you mean they own your story? Annie read the clause. Recipient grants the Foundation irrevocable rights to use recipient's name, likeness, image, personal history, public statements, written statements, recorded statements, educational journey, and related biographical materials for purposes deemed consistent with the Foundation's mission. Sam's cane tapped once. Richard said, No. Eleanor's eyes were cold. Yes. Annie kept reading because stopping would let the anger in. Recipient further agrees not to issue independent public statements concerning any matter involving affiliated partners without prior written review. Mark whispered, That's a gag. No, Annie said. It's a leash. No one corrected her. Richard looked toward the door, then back at Eleanor. We should call them. Not yet, Eleanor said. Annie turned to the final pages. There's a signature block. Eleanor came closer. The authorized representative for Future Door Scholarship Fund was not Caroline Webb. Her name appeared only in the cover letter. The signature page listed a different person as administrative counsel. Thomas Greer. For a moment, the room fell into a silence Annie could feel through the paper. Priya turned to her laptop. Same spelling? Annie slid the page across. Same spelling. Mark pulled up his notes from Caldwell Rhine Holdings. Same address too. Suite 410, Wilmington, Delaware. Eleanor took both pages and placed them side by side. Thomas Greer signs for the Foundation offering Annie money and silence. He appears as registered contact for Caldwell Rhine Holdings. He appears in the metadata chain tied to foreign affiliate debt. Richard's face had gone flat with anger. Victor sent this to her. Eleanor nodded once. Through a Foundation wearing church clothes, June looked at Annie. Baby, did you ever apply for anything like this? No. Then they found you. Annie looked at the pages. Tuition, housing, food, a future that did not smell like bleach, a closet with clothes that fit, a room with heat that worked, a class schedule printed with her name. For 1 second, the offer hurt more than the insult had. It showed her the life she wanted, then wrapped it in silence. She pushed the packet away. Richard spoke carefully. Annie, we can protect you. She looked at him. Can you pay my rent without buying my mouth? The question struck him hard. Eleanor answered instead. If you continue working as a consultant, you'll be paid under the agreement you signed. Anything beyond that we document cleanly. No gifts. Annie nodded. Good. Sam's voice softened. You don't have to prove you can suffer. I'm not. Annie folded the first page back over the packet. I'm proving I can read. Eleanor picked up the phone. We respond in writing. Short. No emotion. Richard said, I want my name on it. No, Eleanor said. Mine. This is my company. And this is witness contact. You stay out of the first letter. Richard accepted it, though not happily. Eleanor dictated while Priya typed. Miss Webb, we acknowledge receipt of the materials sent to Annie Carter. Miss Carter declines the offer. Any further attempt to contact her directly regarding matters connected to Whitmore Global Holdings, Caldwell International Partners, Future Door Scholarship Fund, or related entities should be directed to my office. Annie looked up. Add one line. Eleanor waited. Tell them I said the paper is pretty, but the leash still shows. Eleanor's mouth twitched. I'll translate that. June said. Don't translate it too much. Eleanor added. Miss Carter has reviewed the materials and identified provisions she considers inconsistent with an unrestricted educational grant. Annie shrugged. That's lawyer for leash. Priya sent the response. For the first time since the call, Richard sat down. He looked older than he had that morning. How did you know not to trust it? Annie thought about her mother's kitchen table, the insurance letters, the day Martha had smiled at a charity form and said, they never give the poor a free door without counting who gets locked in. Because it came too fast, Annie said. Because they wanted me alone. Because they used words that made the cage sound like a scholarship. Sam nodded. Your mama's voice again. Always. Mark's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and swore under his breath. Eleanor turned. What now? Another article. He hesitated before reading it aloud. Whitmore deal delay deepens as anonymous sources question cleaning workers' credibility. Richard closed his eyes for 1 second. Priya took the phone from Mark and read further. It says Annie Carter may have been offered educational assistance by a charitable foundation and declined, raising questions about her motives. June slapped her palm on the table. They offered the rope and blamed her for not wearing it. Annie felt heat rise behind her eyes, but she did not cry. Not in that room, not with those papers on the table. Richard stood again. Enough. We go public. Eleanor shook her head. Not with contract details. Then with her name. Correctly. Annie looked at him. Don't turn me into a poster. I won't. They will. Richard had no answer. That honesty mattered more than a promise. Eleanor gathered the scholarship papers into a folder and wrote on the tab, Future Door, Greer. Annie watched the name disappear under black marker. Thomas Greer was no longer just a name on a schedule. He was a hand reaching through 3 doors at once. Near 6, Eleanor told everyone to stop for the day. No one listened. Richard made calls to board members. Priya kept digging through foundation records. Mark searched Delaware filings. June left to cover Annie's old shift without asking permission. Sam waited by the elevator. Annie packed her notebook, then paused beside the rejected scholarship packet. Eleanor noticed. Are you all right? Annie gave a small, tired smile. I'm trying not to hate the part of me that wanted it. Eleanor's face softened. Wanting a door open doesn't make you weak. It does if the door is bait. No, Eleanor said. It makes the bait cruel. Annie looked at her for a moment, then nodded. On the elevator down, Sam handed Annie a wrapped dinner plate from June. Fried chicken, green beans, and cornbread in a plastic container. She said if you don't eat it, she'll come to your place and lecture you through the door. Annie took it. She would. She has. The elevator hummed downward. Annie held the food in one hand and her mother's notebook in the other. Upstairs, the rich men were choosing language for war. Downstairs, June had packed cornbread because somebody still had to keep Annie alive through it. When the doors opened, Sam looked at her. You did right again. Annie stepped out. I'm tired of doing right. I know. She looked back at him. Does it ever get easier? Sam considered lying, then didn't. No, but you get harder to move. Annie walked into the lobby, past the security desk, past the polished reception wall, past people who now said her name in lowered voices. Outside, Caldwell's story was spreading. Inside her pocket, Martha Carter's notebook pressed against her side like a second heartbeat. By Friday morning, Caldwell stopped pretending the fight was private. The lawsuit reached Eleanor's inbox at 8:06 a.m., 42 pages long, filed in commercial arbitration, and copied to every lawyer with a title worth printing. By 8:30, 3 business outlets had the headline. By 9, the lobby screens were showing Richard Whitmore's face beside Victor Caldwell's, with Annie's name buried halfway down the story like a match waiting for dry grass. Caldwell International seeks $150 million after Whitmore abandons deal. Annie read the headline from the security desk, standing beside Sam with June's cornbread still wrapped in foil inside her bag. They sued? She asked. Sam looked at the screen. That's what rich folks do when the truth costs too much. The anchor on the lobby television spoke with a calm face and hungry eyes. Sources close to Caldwell International say the breakdown followed an unusual intervention by a cleaning employee who allegedly accessed sensitive transaction documents during a private signing meeting. June came up behind Annie with a spray bottle in one hand and a rag in the other. Allegedly. That word is how cowards put perfume on a lie. Annie kept reading the crawl at the bottom of the screen. Untrained worker at center of dispute. Her stomach tightened, but her face stayed still. Sam turned the volume down. Don't let a TV tell you who you are before breakfast. I already know who I am, Annie said. That's why they keep trying to rename me. Upstairs, the 36th floor conference room had become a war room. Eleanor had printed the lawsuit in full, tabbed it, marked it, and placed one copy at each seat. Richard stood near the window with both hands on the back of a chair. His board had already called twice. His bankers had called 3 times. His public relations team wanted language. His outside counsel wanted caution. His temper wanted Victor Caldwell in the room. Eleanor did not care what his temper wanted. Sit, she told him. Richard looked at her. Sit down, Richard. Angry men skip paragraphs. He sat. Annie entered with Sam a few steps behind her. Eleanor looked up, and for a moment her face softened before returning to work. Annie, you don't have to read all of it today. Annie put her mother's notebook on the table. Yes, I do. Richard pulled out a chair for her, then seemed to realize what he was doing. Annie noticed but did not comment. She sat, opened the lawsuit, and began. The complaint was written with the clean cruelty of people who knew how to wound without raising their voice. It accused Whitmore Global of breaching the negotiation agreement, damaging Caldwell's reputation, interfering with financing, and suspending the signing based on the unqualified observations of an unauthorized cleaning worker. Annie read that sentence twice. Mark Delaney said quietly, "We can strike that language later." Annie did not look up. "It's already doing what they wrote it to do." Eleanor nodded. Exactly. Page 6 claimed the hidden text was non-operative formatting residue. Page 9 said all material obligations had been disclosed. Page 14 accused Whitmore of acting under emotional pressure following a public embarrassment. Page 21 named Annie Carter directly. She stopped there. Richard saw it. What? Annie read aloud. Miss Carter, a non-employee of Whitmore Global, with no legal, financial, or transactional credentials, obtained proximity to confidential documents through unclear circumstances and provided speculative statements that Mr. Whitmore improperly relied upon. June, who had come upstairs carrying a tray of coffee,